because we've been through that stuff so much, and they're all good. It's just a debate of whether taxpayer dollars should be spent on this, and this is what this committee has dwelled on for as long as I can remember.
There was actually, Dave, there was actually an article, I believe, a couple weeks ago in the Citizen.
Yeah. That'd probably be available online then.
I would think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The
The
Citizen. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to beat this dead horse, but just if somebody sends you a letter, if I sent you a letter and said, can you please add a line item in next year's budget for $2,000 for the Fred Fund? No, like that's my question is how.
They don't do that. They've said they didn't do that.
It could show up as a request, but other than having it show up as a request,
It's not in the
it doesn't
budget.
mean anything.
It has to be a warrant article because it's not in the selectmen's budget.
Well, not in the selectmen, but it did make it onto the department request as an official department request, though, for this
Well,
welfare.
Of the health and welfare services, correct?
Right.
yeah, because they requested, somebody requested it, and that's the only reason.
But somebody
they made
within
it.
the town.
Hmm?
Somebody within the town requested it.
To answer your question, if not to be funny, but if Fred Butler United Way was a nonprofit organization with the correct tax ID and all of that,
Yeah.
sent in a request, it may show up here.
As a request.
But if Gus Benavides says, hey, I'd like you to give $2,500 for my kid's college education fund, that's not going to show up here.
But I guess, could anybody with a tax ID, are you required to include that as because they're not a department. This is the welfare department requesting it. Is the welfare department offered any discretion to include this or not?
It's not the welfare department that's requesting it. It shows up in the budget under our special warrant articles as an outside agency request. But if it's not in the budget committee's budget, it's not going to be, they're not going to get any money unless they do a petition. So it's just a request.
Anytime anybody sends in a request and they're qualified, they're going to show up on this sheet and be zeroed out. Or can it just be stuck? And they just get the request in the mail and say, well, that one's not even going to show up on our sheet with zeros. Or does it automatically go right on there?
I don't know how to answer that because, this, I did not do a check to see if they are a 501c3. I did not do a check to see if they are registered with the Secretary of State's office. I get the letter, I threw it in the packet. If I get a letter from Fred Butler asking for $10,000, it's probably not going to go into my, probably not going to show up.
Good try though, Fred.
I guess my interpretation would be when he gets some information from some outfit that's looking for money, knowing that it's not going to be in the budget, knowing we might have to deal with it if there's a warrant article comes in, he puts the data in the book, and therefore it's on as a request. That doesn't bother me since it's not gone beyond that unless...
It doesn't bother me knowing that that's how it's consistently done. It doesn't bother me. I was just wondering how it ended up that way.
Yeah.
I guess in the final analysis, I use my discretion, I guess would be the best answer. So, Fred, your letter's not going to make it in. Just so you know. Gus, though, he's a selectman. His letter's probably going to make it.
For the record, no.
It's for the kids.
Yes, it's for the children.
Yeah. The human fund.
Yeah, the human fund, you're right.
My kids.
Okay. If you look at, if you really look at the welfare thing in general, the town seems to get a fair amount of bang for the buck from the welfare. That's why I keep looking at this and wondering how long that's going to stay that way, because this has to be as challenging a time as we've had. Next item was debt. The white tab near the back. And that shows you the four categories, you know, debt and interest. Then at the bottom of the page is this capital trust, which is, you know, every year now we put $58,000 away for maintenance on the famous Lakes Business Park. What a terrific investment. Any questions on that?
Just this same one that I asked last year with the banks, et cetera, and I know this is a different process, but I know my checking account, I get like .0001 interest. Are any of these notes able to be rebundled, renegotiated, anything that would work to our advantage on interest levels? My goal.
I'll let the finance director.
What kind of interest rate are you paying? They're pretty low, aren't they? 4?
Between 4 and 4.5.
That's what I thought.
And the two of the big ones, there's only 2 more years left on it. So refinancing them, is it worth
You
it?
might not get the payback on the
We
cost.
definitely wouldn't get the payback,
Yeah,
because
okay.
I know one of them is, I think the interest rate might be 3.75. So
Jeff, when you say 2 more years, pay it off to the balloon to refinance?
there's only 2 more years to pay them off.
Oh,
If you look at that packet I handed out tonight, there's a schedule of how much longer the bonds have to go. And I'm pretty sure it's the Lakes Business Park and the Village Sewer.
Can you give us a page number?
It's in the packet I gave out.
There aren't page numbers
There's no
on it.
page numbers on it.
Sure there are.
Yes, there are.
Oh, that's only on the audit.
Oh,
Before the audit. It says a page or 2 before the audit.
I'll look it up later.
Statement of bonded debt.
Jeff, is it the one that's labeled statement of bonded debt?
Yes. So you see the Village Sewer Extension and Lakes Business Park, the last payments in 2013 on those 2. And the Village Sewer Extension is through the state revolving fund, and I think we're only paying, like I said, maybe 3.5, 3.75 on that one. And I'm not even sure if the state would allow us to refinance that.
Does the debt section actually cover the bond for the proposed fire truck, or would that be in the end?
No.
So that's not on the answer yet.
Right. Because we haven't taken the bond out yet.
Right.
The way that's structured, it shows up in the special warrant articles as a $450,000 appropriation, and then in the revenue budget, on the line item bond proceeds, it shows up as a $450,000 revenue, so there's no impact on the tax rate because the expense is offset by the revenue.
This year, and then next
Right.
year you pay it off. You start
So when
paying.
we begin making, if it's approved, and we begin making payments, there'll be a line item for both the debt and principal payments going forward. Right. And it looked like.
I know you told us.
We've
Is
seen
it a
510.
10-year bond? Is that
Well,
what?
what we've looked at is 10 years, it'd be about $51,000 a year. But again, if it goes through, the fire department's gonna look very carefully at a lease from the manufacturer and see how that might compare with bond rates as well.
Have we looked at actually repairing this vehicle?
The manufacturer has gone out of business.
Yeah,
That's
but
probably
they-
more
they
appropriate
could point
question.
Well, that's the discussion we'll have to have with the fire department, because that's the kind of discussion we need to have with the fire department. You know, one of the big issues is number of engines and everything else. That whole discussion needs to be had. Anything, any questions on that page?
Yeah, I just have one question. on the Bean property, does that, I mean, I remember, I wasn't on the board that year, and I don't remember, how did, that was placed by a petition warrant to buy the Bean, for the $1 million for the Bean property?
For the Bean conservation
And that was,
easement.
it was a conservation easement,
And we don't own it.
so we only owe, okay.
Keep it from being developed. And unfortunately, they invested in that company that went bankrupt.
FRM.
Solyndra.
A little bit older than that company. I mean, how awful can that be?
Something or other, or D?
FRM.
Oh.
Went into the,
Big chunk.
every penny.
Who did the beans?
Boy, I mean, that would make you think. Okay, so back to my summary sheet. As you can see, we went through these generally feeling the budgets we reviewed there, which was sort of admin and catch-all, was pretty good. The only change that was made by the subcommittee, which has to be followed up with this full committee, was cutting the stipends in half for elected officials. What was that?
The Municipal Association.
Well, we didn't, it was 2-2, so that didn't get changed. There was a recommendation that we don't join the municipal association, and 2 felt that way and 2 didn't, so nothing was done.
The
As far as,
question I did want to ask with that same, you went over that fast at the beginning, and
Okay.
we'll go to another tab. That jumped, or looked like it jumped up, is that because the actual cost jumped up? Is that what I'm seeing there?
you mean the municipal association?
Yeah,
They basically tell us what we have to pay, whatever town is,
okay.
it is a member. And that maybe,
Subcommittee was 2-2, okay.
yeah, the general feeling, we've had the discussion lots of times. I happen to be one of the 2s in pro and staying there. You know, the downside of it is it seems like you're playing with government to play with government. But the upside is, if you don't play, you don't have a chance.
I actually voted to keep it in there. Not on principle, I'm against, you know, like you said, we're using government funds to fight the government. But on the other side, Scott explained that this is something the selectmen's gonna go through with anyhow, they'll pull money from somewhere else.
I mean, just
I
for
don't see the
example,
sense in picking a fight with the selectmen over this.
the municipal association is behind this challenge to unfunded mandates, right? They're involved in that. I mean, they're involved with representing the town's view against the state government to a certain extent. And it you know, it's pretty hard to walk away from that and expect to get any benefits that may accrue out of some of the stuff they do, and it may not accrue every year by all means. That was my rationale for saying we stay in it.
Thank you. No other questions on these.
I did provide a handout.
Oh, yes, you have,
That
yeah, you can pass that around. It was,
just
yeah,
assumed everybody had one.
Sorry.
For those of you who wonder, you know, what do we get for being a member of NHMA, that handout is an attempt to explain what we get.
now remember, our approach is that,
We are gonna need all of them, yeah. Thank you.
our approach is that if somebody goes home and reads this thing and we don't take it out and we approve this budget, you know, we're open, this budget's open until we prepare for our final preparation for the Budget Committee's public hearing. So, you know, that can always be revisited. So there's a bunch of material here that may change somebody's mind, plus or minus. On the stipends, the only question you have to have there is, you know, I think it's honorable that the selectmen didn't take one, and I feel good about that. The only question you have there is some of these other people who are doing something for the town, will we have people fill those tasks if there's no stipend? Like the checklist supervisors. And we've obviously had a lot of discussion on those for years, but the reality is it's a pretty dogged job, and I do think you know they need to get paid something for it. And then so the question the subcommittee we had was, okay, yeah, maybe they need to get paid something. How about half of something? You know. So anyway, you can sort of see why the vote was 3-1 based on some of the discussion here.
Are there how many people? How many people come in for the elections?
Well, there's one treasurer and a deputy.
No, for the supervisors of the checklist.
There's 3 of those, right?
There's 3 of those, and is this the year we have 4 elections?
Yes.
Yes.
2012, we will have 4.
No,
Yeah.
wasn't there some
And the
discussion about pulling out another assistant, paid assistant? I thought that was in the letter from Connie Moses.
Yeah.
Just in the, to assist with the presidential and.
Well, the only increase was 200. Her suggestion was 200 for the chairperson.
I've seen that somewhere, right?
It's in the town clerk
The
tax.
supervisors are actually paid from 2 separate accounts. In this budget that you've discussed tonight, elected officials, that's their annual stipend for holding the position and the duties associated outside of the elections. In the elections and registration budget, there is a flat figure that they are paid on a per election basis in addition to their stipend. And that's where you saw the additional monies for assisting for that process.
That comes from town clerk?
It's underneath the town clerk's budget, elections and registration. And
Separate
the
tab.
thought behind that was those people are working right next to people who are being paid, election workers who are paying $8.25 an hour. And the thought was in fairness, the supervisor checklists who are working right next to them should also be similarly compensated. So that's why there's 2 separate pay systems for those.
Okay.
So they're actually making more than what we see here under the elected officials.
Yes.
I was curious about the terms, because I don't remember when they get elected, are they elected for 1, for 3, for 5 years?
6-year terms.
Pardon me?
6-year terms.
Well, would we be able, I mean, which leads to my next question is, would we be able to make that recommendation if you were elected for a 6-year term,
And somebody cuts
expected to get X times 6,
And then I cut my
somebody comes
salary.
into you in year 3 and says, you're only gonna get half of that, is that something that we're able to do? It's just a question.
Or you mean everyone elected from here on out would be?
Yeah, I mean, that's more to the point of what I'm saying is,
What about that, Scott?
if you were elected, it's not a contract, but you were elected for you put your hat in the ring with certain conditions attached, knowing that you were gonna get a stipend, so to speak.
My reaction at the time, that's a good point. My reaction at the time was, you always have the option of resigning. You know, in other words, if we, the budget committee and the selectmen, agreed to cut the wages of an elected position, one of these, and those people don't like it, they can always stop. And the question is, if you cut it to the point where you get nobody to fill it. And you know, that's the real question that was raised in our subcommittee. Because, you know, people can think, yeah, well, everybody ought to donate their time to the town because it's great to do. There's a lot of people that don't donate any time to the town. It's not that great. So you can question, these people are being paid and they're doing a job. You know,
And we're doing a very big job and a very good job here for no
we have
dollars.
the choice, and we're willing to do it for nothing.
It's right behind
They should be too.
the next tab after tax collector, town clerk tax elections and registrations.
The simple answer to David's question, is it legal to cut the pay of an elected official, in the middle of a term is yes, because all salaries for elected officials are set by town meeting. And town meeting can make that number whatever they want it to be.
Okay.
As an extreme, you look at the town clerk tax collector who draws a $58,000 salary. Conceivably, the voters could say, we want to cut that in half. Will it mean the resignation of the town clerk tax collector? Most likely, and all that goes with that. But it is, it's not illegal to do that.
Okay, thanks.
And you can take, for instance, the moderator, you know, they spend time at the elections. There's going to be 4 elections and a couple of meetings. I mean,
Can I throw one other thing in
Yeah.
to answer Phyllis's question on how many elections? Everyone's crossing their fingers from the people that we talked to over at Denise Gagnier's office, is that Florida hasn't screwed things up where the primaries will be in December rather than January.
What'd you hear about Nevada just moved up?
No, I did not. So there's possibly another election this year yet, and only 3 next year.
And they're still getting penalized, losing half the delegates.
Yeah, but, you know, this is in terms of cost to the town, though, and where they go.
and we quizzed a little bit on what does the treasurer do and what's the treasurer assistants do, and there is some discussion about it. There is some real live work goes on there. I have to admit, is it worth $3,000? It's debatable. It's been $3,000 for the last, what, century? It's been for a long time. Hasn't changed.
But you can also look at the work that the selectmen do. They're really full-time, part-time workers for $0, which is certainly much appreciated by the townspeople. It would seem to me that others could step up to the plate also. I think what's good for one is good for the other, and I don't think the request is unreasonable at all.
I have to agree. I mean, I look at all the time that I put in to the school board, and I don't take a stipend.
Right.
Yeah, it would be
shared sacrifice.
Yeah, it would be different
Yeah.
if this board or this committee received a stipend and we said, well, nobody else should get one, but we should. But there has never been a stipend
I don't think
that
anybody
I know
gets
of.
a stipend. I think that
And
would
I have to tell you, when I ran, I didn't run because I was going to get a stipend.
Yeah.
be- yeah, when
I think that the argument I made as the minority in that group was that the selectmen and the school board are positions where you desired to be there to make a difference. Do you think the treasurer makes a difference? They're doing something good for the town, well appreciated by the town, not visible, and part of the reason they do it's for money. Now, I agree that seems like a lot of money. I'll be the first to say that. I just get worried that if you do some of these things, you'll get nobody running, and then what do? We have to hire a person to do it.
Well,
Lots of times we use that as an excuse. Well, nobody will run. And I think we hang our hat on that too often.
Hasn't been very long ago, we had budget committee, which is a fairly popular thing. We had a hard time getting people to run for it. It's only been in recent years we've had any people run.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm not going to at all disagree with the comment that you just made, because obviously we look at the same thing. You know, we look at it. However, with elections, we have to have them. Meaning elections, we have to have elections.
Oh, no, I understand.
We have to have them. As a result, we have to man them. Now, people could volunteer, which would be tremendous. What a blessing that would be. If they don't, the town will be forced to have to provide workers for that.
And overtime.
And overtime, or we'll have to wind up hiring, like, you know, with all due respect to Mia here, you know, we couldn't get somebody to volunteer to take minutes. What happened? We had to pay somebody to do the minutes. It's the same thing. We're going to wind up having to, if that was to happen, that everybody said, I'm not going to do this, the town in turn, we're going to have to pay workers to do it.
I'll sign up to volunteer.
Believe me, we could take 1 million of them.
Well,
I'd
I
love
think, but I think the point that Sue's making is correct. We don't know unless we try. And you may find out that there will be people who would say, yeah, okay, I feel it's the right thing to do. Not that I'm obligated, but it's the right thing to do, and they may do it. And I would like to see, this kind of goes with what Terry used to talk about with the stipends in the sports. It's like, you look at the football, coaches used to be there all the time, the people who would walk up and down with the signs for the downs and the chains and everything else used to be all volunteers. We have a tendency nowadays to professionalize everything, even if it's just a stipend. Well, sometimes people will, if asked, do things for the honor of doing it.
Now, we have certain requirements, like the checklist is a RSA requirement, right, Scott? I mean, you have to have...
There are statutes that spell out the duties and the fact that those positions, the town is required to have those positions.
I would be hard-pressed to find any volunteers to do the supervisors and the checklist job.
We had volunteers.
How many years ago? 400?
No.
It wasn't that many years ago.
We've
We
had
a lot of
volunteers. Everybody volunteered. There was
Everybody
never
volunteered.
anybody that was ever paid for the supervisors of the checklist. This is only in the absolute recent times. I think in the last 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
That's right.
All those
Hey,
ladies
Jeff,
that you,
you're
that are
the
listed in the
historical
town
guy here.
report.
How long have we paid supervisors of the checklist?
just since the
A
new
stipend?
administration here.
Just the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
There you go.
They were always paid like the election workers.
They got
for
a
what
lunch.
They did at the polls.
They got a sandwich
Now,
and lunch,
Minimum wage for a number of hours.
and that was it.
But hold
They're
on.
still making
That-
minimum wage.
Right, that's different than we paid them a sandwich. How many years has that been that they received payment on election day?
That's
Since I've been
very
here,
recent, too.
the first time. So we're pushing 20 years.
Okay, so to be clear,
Yeah,
this was not the new administration or the current board.
or the last board.
Right.
It's
Just to
been
be
20
clear,
years they've been paid.
minimum. And that's why we had debated it between 3 or 4 years ago, which is what you're talking about, because as you guys know, because it's come before the board, the supervisor of the checklist, obviously Connie Moses came before this committee.
I think
Came
she was
before
the
the
first one
selectmen.
to
She was the
initiate
first.
They
this.
were asking money, they were asking for more money per hour, they were asking for offices, computers, printers,
cabinets.
on and on and on and on and on. And that's why we were like, whoa, wait a minute. We had the same belief. That's why, again, I believe, Scott, this is the second year in a row that she's requested the $200 extra for the chairperson.
She did.
Yeah, she requested that before.
And that's why, again, we politely said no. But, just to be clear,
But what Pat
This-
and I are saying, for all these years that we've lived here,
yeah,
those positions were always filled by ladies that were interested in doing that with absolutely no expectations at all.
but they were paid.
They were paid at the elections.
Rain, snow, Shirley Snow.
No, I don't think,
they have to pay.
Well, we have
40,
a...
50 years ago, no
20
way they were
years
paid.
ago.
Wait a second, we just had a guy who's been here for
I'm
20...
talking about in our memory.
Well, we have a guy who's worked here for a number of years who told you they were paid for elections.
There might have been
They just
additional
doubled it.
volunteers.
They just
Correct.
doubled
There
the
could have been
20
3 out of
years,
6 of
Dick.
them that were
I
paid.
mean, so we're talking about, minimum
400
wage,
years ago,
you're
maybe.
essentially volunteering, I mean.
Yes, Scott.
Part of, I think, what has driven Mrs. Moses to come here and speak about the stipend is directly related to the increasing responsibilities of the supervisors of the checklist in the statutes as well.
Yeah.
I just wanted to know that that's been a lot of the basis of her coming in here and doing that. And she has already indicated she will not be, her term is up this in 2012, and she will not be running. And the other 2 ladies who are supervisors of checklist were both appointed in 2011 because we had some turnover there. So it's conceivable we could have 3 brand new supervisors of the checklist.
When you look at what they do, I would never do it as a volunteer. I wouldn't do it for that money either. But I mean,
Especially because it is a 12-hour day.
yeah, well, not only that, they have some chores they do in between elections.
Oh, without a doubt.
Or
Without a
just-
doubt.
but-
Without a
Go
doubt.
through and purge this past year.
Yeah.
They started at 7.
With some
But they-
rigor.
But also, the town clerk's office carries quite a bit of that load as well.
It does carry some of that load. These people are the ones held responsible for what that election list is, though, and so forth.
But most folks, during the course of moving into town and establishing their households, go over to see the town clerk, and they register to vote over there. So a great deal of that work is done. All the paperwork is done in the town hall.
And if the town clerk had a responsibility for it,
I think.
would feel better about it.
I know when I moved to town, I registered right across the hall there. I later got a phone call from Connie Moses, because they do checks and follow up on it. There was an
Jeff,
issue
did you have
between
your-
my Florida residents
Jeff, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think, as Scott said, part of Connie's request for additional money is, prior to about 6 years ago, each individual town had their own software for maintaining their voter checklist and database. And typically, the town clerk did a lot of that work. You know, the people went to the town clerk, filled out the form, the town clerks entered it into the computer, and the supervisors simply double-checked their work. But then the state took that database down to Concord, basically, and now the town clerk's office does much less of that data entry. I don't even know if they do any of that data entry anymore. And the supervisors are directly responsible for logging onto the state database, entering that information. The state's much more stringent on making sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, and that type of stuff. So the process is much longer than it used to be. And that was one of the reasons why Connie did ask if they could get some compensation for that, because they were spending so much more time in here once the state took over the process.
Non-funded mandate.
Yep.
Yes.
Chairman, just going back to, for throwing them the small bone of paying, it's going to keep them, ensure that they meet a certain standard, like as opposed to a volunteer. For example, I volunteered for kayak.
Croc TV.